Hey guys, and welcome to the next episode of The Scrolls. In the previous episode, we were talking about prose and influence throughout history, and I had mentioned that we're going to go into characters and how the influences had from culture and history had impacted me to create these characters within the ancient scrolls of Lukatona. So, let's dive in. So, welcome back, guys. In this episode, we have a guest appearance. My friend and fellow comic book author, Luke Molver, aka Billy Pineapples. Thanks for coming, man.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, yeah. So, we've spoken ad nauseum about characters in just various things that we like and the stories that we both have written. To you, what is like one of the most important things about characters and like the influence of characters and how you name them?
Well, for me, in my writing and comic books and art, the characters are actually the first thing I create, I conceive of, and I find that they inform everything else. It's different for different artists. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to do it. But for me, the characters are the cornerstone, the foundation of where a story is built from. If I can figure out my characters' motivations, what drives them, their relationship with each other, their conflicts, the story, for me, tends to fall into place around that. And I think the naming of characters is equally important. One of my favorite fantasy authors, Ursula Le Guin, who wrote A Wizard of Earthsea, always said that naming her characters was a huge part of how the story was told, because it not only created the characters themselves, it informed the world they lived in, it informed the environment, the atmosphere, the magic of the genre that she was actually writing in. So for me, a lot of the time, a lot of my work is actually named for its protagonists. My book's about King Shaka, called Shaka Rising. My book's based on the blues musician Robert Johnson, were called Sunday's Slave, the protagonist being a man called Rondo Sunday. The first comic book I ever wrote and drew was called Nero, named after the titular character. So while I don't think it's necessary to name your book after your main character, I do believe, for me, characters are a foundation for where my story is built from, and their names are especially important.
I think that's something that is integral to the story, specifically when it comes to culture, right? Like, for example, like in Lukatona, the elves are from an Indian descent, so a character like Naril or Inara must have that frenetic, which is very similar to a person in history who may have lived in India in ancient times.
In your work, in the ancient scrolls of Lukatona, as you've said, you've obviously, a lot of it is based on real history. It's a fantasy work, but a lot of it is based on real history, real cultures. And I like the way you've taken naming conventions from those to delineate and specify the various races and kingdoms of your world. Perhaps could I ask you?
Yeah, of course.
Is that how you went about naming your characters. I mean, are the names of Nareel? Again, similarly, there's a rhythm to it. Nareel, La Reina. There's a sort of, I enjoy saying those names. You did take them from real life cultural and historical backgrounds.
Yeah, I think for me, it was always meant to be some form of rhythm of understanding that language from who these people are, right? But I know there are a couple of characters, for example, that you've had an issue with in terms of names, i.e. like the Hindrim, which don't really sound Nguni, but they sound a little bit Norse, right? So some bridging into that form of problems of where character names can start to lose their identity. What are some of the problems that you've cropped up with or even found within the book itself?
Well, and on what you've just mentioned, there's a huge cast of characters in your work, and they cross over a large. There's a huge cross section of races and of kingdoms and even of timelines, that are occurring within your story. And while I do enjoy the naming conventions that you've used, there were a few examples that I felt that almost confused me a little bit. Like there's a race called what race is Bengadu from?
Oh, the Hindrim.
The Hindrim. Now the Hindrim are a kingdom loosely based on sort of tribal African kingdoms, right?
Nguni culture.
Yeah, Nguni culture. And one of the named characters of this kingdom is Bengadu, which immediately it sounds African. It sounds tribal. It sounds like it comes from this continent. But you named the race themselves. You named them the Hindrim, which to me sounds very Norse. It sounds very white. It sounds very Valhalla. It does not sound like African. And in a way that almost confused me. I was like, okay, well, because there were a couple of times I have to think, okay, wait, no, the Hindrim are these African dudes. So, I think that also speaks to the power of the naming of your naming. How you can utilize, with such a diverse cast, with such a large crew of characters and kingdoms, you can use the names to specify them very deliberately. And I think that's necessary, especially if you have such a sprawling narrative with a wide cast of characters. I think it's even more important to do that sort of thing. There were a couple of other examples, like in the realm of men, you've got a lot of like US names, like Alphys and Alpheus, and for me that almost reminded me of kind of the Roman Empire, like Gaius and Titus and Andronicus and all of them, which I think is effective. But then there were also you used a couple of US names in other races too. Morganus was a wizard. So there were a few points where I was like, oh wait, hang on, no, Morganus, he's a different dude. So for me, constructive criticism, I might try and just bring some of those together, Like those US names reminded me immediately of kind of Roman Gaelic stuff, and that worked. Occasionally you drop in some wild apostrophes, which is also cool, but then keep the apostrophes to one set, one kingdom. Keep them to one. All the X's and the Z's and the apostrophes belong to one race.
So I think in the basis of that,
I do the same thing with my work. So
I personally feel that there is a cross-culturalism that happens within Lokotona, and the names, for example, like the Indrian, they are an offshoot of a culture that existed, like the Moors, and which is basically what Luden was. Luden wizards were inspired by the Moor, and a lot of those wordings, they kind of cross culture into different avenues. For example, like if you go into like even Libya, right? There are Tamil words that are used there, but they are completely different sort of meanings to those words, for example, right? Even like in Urdu is basically an offshoot of Hindi, but a lot of the words can be changed in terms of its meaning. So I feel like in terms of characters like Morganis or the Himdrim and stuff like that, it's not so blatantly obvious to be like, oh yeah, this is an Nguni tribe, but also there has been a diversity of cross-culturalism that has been occurring.
So
over
again,
time.
something that reflects the real world.
100%.
But then I would ask you, did you write it that way? Was that what your
because
intent to begin with?
the intention of the DNA, for example, like when Naril, she goes to the Himdrim village, and they're referring to stories that she's heard as a kid in her own culture, but she's now seeing it from a completely different perspective because it's from their culture. And they all come from the same sort of backdrop.
Okay, well, but not. I love
From
this
African
because this is actually, again, you're not only naming characters with real life historical and cultural reference, but you're talking about the effects and impact of stuff like colonialism, of stuff like of cross cultural settling and which I think is interesting if you're doing it deliberately.
No, it's absolutely.
If that is a theme in your work, and if so, I think you should push it even further, because I'm not sure that was always obvious in your first work. But I love that. I love those ideas. I love the idea of getting deeper in through the characters, getting deeper into the world and into these ideas of why they are named as such.
All right, guys. In the next episode, we'll be talking about world building and getting into how I constructed the world and how these places and these environments have existed. So, shameless punt. The Ancient Scrolls of Lokotona, The Bleeding Anchors, is available on Amazon as a Kindle version and paperback. And if you're local here in Durban, KZN, you can go to Ike's bookstore on Florida Road to purchase your copy. See you guys in the next episode.